Hello, this is Velocity and you're watching Khuaab Library Project. So we were covering the structure of the Quran. So in the Medinan surahs, by which the time the Muslims were no longer persecuted minority but an established community with the Prophet as its leader, the Quran begins to introduce laws to govern the Muslim community with regards to marriage. So in the Medinan period, which is the later 11 years of Hijri, commerce and finance and international relationships, wars, and peace. So these are the example of these can be found in surahs 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and 9. This era has also witnessed the emergence of a new group, the Munafiqun, or hypocrites who pretended to profess Islam but were actually working against the Islamic State, and these hypocrites are a frequent theme in the Medinan surahs. We also see here a discussion of the people of the book, because now the audience were not polytheists but rather monotheistic people. Particular reference to Jewish and Christian communities, both those contemporary with the Prophet and those in the past. It will be seen that the Quran tends to speak of groups or classes of people rather than individuals. Throughout the Meccan and Medinan surahs, the beliefs and morals of the Quran are put forward and emphasized, and these form the bulk of Quranic material. The percentage of strictly legal text in the Quran is very small indeed. The Quran contains some 6,200 verses. Out of these, only 100 deal with rituals and practices, 70 deals with personal law, 70 deal versus civil laws, 30 penal laws, and 20 judicial matters and testimony. Moreover, these tend to deal with general principles such as justice, kindness, charity, rather than detailed laws in a legal matter explained in language that appeals to the emotions, conscience, and belief in God, and verses dealing with retaliation. Once the principles are established, the text goes on to soften the hearts of both parties, offender and victim, introducing the obligation of the fast of Ramadan, which is currently. The aim is throughout is to make this fasting easy and highly desirable. It is indeed perceived this way by Muslims. The month of Ramadan is a time of festivity and rejoicing. So, coming to the stylistic features, the Quran has its own style. It may be useful to readers to mention some of the important features of this style. The reader should not expect the Quran to be arranged chronologically, because this needs to be understood that the Quran is not arranged in a chronological manner. So the events which happened before are not mentioned before, they are mentioned much later, and it's all in a different context. So this is the style of the Quran. But the subject matter, the Quran may present in the same surah material about the duties and grace of God, regulation and law, stories of all the prophets, nations, and lessons that can be drawn from these, and descriptions of rewards and punishment on the day of judgment. This stylistic feature serves to reinforce a message, to persuade and to dissuade. This technique may appear to bring repetition of the same themes or stories in different surahs, but that the Quran is above all book of guidance. Each surah adds to the fuller picture and to the effectiveness of the guidance. So every time a single story is mentioned, it is mentioned from a different perspective, and that needs to be understood. For instance, in the midst of the discussion about divorce settlement, dispense introduction, regulation, and instruct the believers to keep up prayer and stand in obedience to God. Later, to resume discussion of the divorce regulations while urging people to give in charity before the day comes when there will be no trade and no help from friends, or instead through the throne verses. To describe the glory of God, refer to the time when no one can intercede for it in anyone's house. So it has its own style. It is not like the style of the normal book. So it is not coherent at times, and it is somewhat always shifting to different topics, but in a bigger context it is related to a certain thing, and it not only tells you about what to do, but it also makes you believe that what you are doing is for the right thing, and the bigger picture is always shown to you. Afterwards, having reminded people of God's power, to give the injunctions to give in charity in a religion that seeks to affect people's behavior, beliefs and behavior in all aspects of life. It's never sufficient to say something once or twice. So this is also a very important factor. When you say something more than once, it is reiterated and it is emphasized. And if the material in God and all the prophets on the day of judgment were dealt with only once, the effect would not also pervasive. This technique compresses many aspects of the Quranic message into the one surah, each forming self-contained lesson. This is particularly useful as it is rare for anyone to read the whole Quran at once. It is mainly used in short sections during worship and preaching, as well as by individuals or on television and radio and daily reading. The central feature of Quranic style is contrast between this world. So this is a very important thing, contrast between this world and the next, each occurring exactly 115 times between believers and disbelievers, between paradise and hell. This has been studied in great detail. Scholars have found truly remarkable patterns of contrast, angels and devils, life and death, secrecy and openness, and so on, occurring exactly this number of times. This sense of balance with the text is contained in passages where the Prophet is instructed, and now the truth has come from your Lord. Let those who wish to believe in it do so, and let those who wish to reject it do so. There is no compulsion in religion. The guidance has become distinct from error. Whereas the Quran from itself is Al-Furqan, the book that distinguishes right from wrong. One stylistic feature that makes the Quran particularly effective is that God speaks directly to people directly to people and to profit, often using be, the first person plural majesty, to represent himself. Involves the reader. This also needs to be understood that he a lot of times mentioned himself as be and not I. So this needs to be understood that this is a majestic language that he is using, or God has used, rather than being implying that he is not one but plural. So this needs to be understood. The Quran is full of dialogue between God and his prophets, Abraham, Noah, between prophets and the audience, Salih and Thamud, between different individuals, Solomon and the Hud. Solomon has achieved and the Queen of Sheba talking to her advisors. One of the obvious stylistic features of the Quran is the use of grammatical shifts from one person pronoun to another, third to second to first person speaker, from singular to plural, majesty in the tenses of verbs. This is an accepted rhetorical practice in Arabic. Similar features used in European literature. It is called an Arabic iltifat, turning from one thing to another. One example is changing from talking about God in the third person to God himself speaking the first person plural of majesty. There is no good in most of their secret talk, only in commanding charity, a good or reconciliation between people. To anyone who does these things seeking to please God, we shall give a rich reward. Instead of saying he will give him, God speaks in the plural majesty to give his personal guarantee of reward. So this is a common aspect of the learning of Quran. So we'll continue in the next video from this part. Thank you for watching.